previous sessions today, so thank you for hanging in there. Just give us a minute or two to let some more folks through the waiting room and we will get started. All right. Good afternoon, everyone who's joining us. Thank you guys so much for taking time to be with us for day 3, episode 5 of Food for All. This is sort of our Policy 101 session. I think a lot of you folks have been with us throughout the day, so I'm not gonna belabor the welcome, but I just wanna say thank you one more time for being here, and thank you to our session leads and 84 Agency for sticking it out, for being a part of a really long day. You guys are absolute total rock stars. That being said, I'm going to kick it one more time today to Austin Sisman from 84 Agency to do a 1-minute tech talk.
Thanks, Spencer. I'm Austin from 84 Agency, and myself and my colleague Cam are here to provide tech support to make sure everything goes smoothly for these sessions. I just want to draw your attention, if you move your mouse to the bottom of your Zoom window, you're going to see your toolbar. There you'll see your mute button and the stop video button. Make sure that you are muted and your video is stopped at any point when you're not being asked to ask a question by the session lead, so that we can focus on our panelists. Also, you'll see the chat. You can ask questions in the chat, and our session leads will try to get to those during the presentation. And for those of you watching on Facebook Live, we do have someone monitoring those comments as well. So if you want to ask a question through Facebook comments, we will try and work those in this afternoon as well. Also, we are monitoring the chat for any untoward comments. So if anything like that were to arise, we do have the ability to block folks from the meeting, so make sure to be respectful in your chats. And if you have any technical questions or any tech support needs, shoot a message in the chat as well and address that to either myself or Cam, and we will get to those as soon as possible. And with that, I will hand it off to Elizabeth Brunella.
Hey, everybody. We're super happy to be here. Thanks again, like everyone said, thanks for sticking it out. I know it's been a long day in front of the screen, but we're hopeful to make this as interesting as possible. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Desktop. Oh, no. Okay. System preferences. Wants me to change. Oh, no. Sorry, guys. Lyda and Rick, I'm on my AFSC computer and it's not letting me make any changes. Did either of you have our presentation loaded? Should have practiced this.
I think I can get it.
Okay. I can get on from my other laptop real quick and log back in. This is already exciting. But if either of you can share your screen, if you have the Google slide presentation up, that would probably be quickest.
I'm working on it.
Okay. Well, we can introduce ourselves while we're working on it. Sorry. I'm Liz, and I'm with the American Friends Service Committee, and my job with the AFSC is with our youth program. Oh, awesome. Thanks, Lida. So, yeah, and you just press view and present. Perfect. So, Lida and Rick, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Go ahead, Lida.
You might be muted, Lida.
Hi there, I'm Rick Wilson with the American Friends Service Committee. I work with Lida and Liz, and you can tell we're tech wizards on here. And my coworker Lida is looking bewildered right now. Can you introduce yourself, or shall we just roll on?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yes. Tech wizard Lida Shepherd coming to you from my tech wizard home in Charleston. And hi, everybody. It's great that you are here. And the thing that, I mean, my mouth was moving earlier. What I was saying is that my little other disclaimer, other than obviously being a tech wizard, is that I have a 2-year-old who is napping, and she might wake up, and you'll get to see her because she'll want to join us too. So, so Liz or Rick, take it away.
Okay, so this session we're going to do is about how to affect policy change, and a little bit about our organization. The American Friends Service Committee is an international group started by the Quakers over 100 years ago. It includes people from all different backgrounds, and ironically or not, they first came to West Virginia in 1922 to work on hunger and food security issues. And it's I don't think at the time they thought it would still be an issue 100 years later, but here we are. So today we're going to share a really simple model of policy change and how it happens, based on political science, but really sticky. It's the kind of thing you can do on the back of an envelope. And it's sort of a general model just to think through where you are and looking at state, federal, or local policy changes. I like it because it's totally not ideological. You can use it to look at why things happened or why they didn't happen. You can use it when you're trying to think through how to pass a piece of legislation or a policy that you'd like to see, or you can use it to think through how to stop policies that you think are bad ideas. So that is basically what we're going to be looking at today. And I guess we can start by thinking how policy change happens and how it doesn't. And one of the hardest lessons that you will learn really quickly if you work to try to change laws or policies is the mere fact that something is a good idea or the right thing to do, or that it makes perfect sense, that it would save lives, it would save money, any of that. The sad thing is that generally has nothing whatsoever to do with whether a law or policy will get passed. So you could have the best idea in the world and it could still not go anywhere. So, unless you have that magical genie. Did you see that genie pop up? That's our tech whiz thing. That's what we do. We're tech whizzes on that. So if magical thinking doesn't help policy change happen, what does? Well, this model, again, is developed by political scientist John Kingdon, who wrote about it in a book called Agendas, Alternatives, and Public Policies. It's a real barn burner. I'm sure you're all going to run out and get one, but here's the really useful part of it. This shows how things happen. And in his metaphor, he talks about there are 3 streams. And when 3 streams come together, a window can open to affect policy change. And when they don't, it's not going to happen. And the 3 streams, it's kind of easy to remember because they all start with the same letter, are the policy, the problem, and the political stream. And we're going to talk a little bit about each one, but it's often useful when you're trying to work through affecting change. Like, is this a real policy or is it just a slogan that sounds good? Do people care about it? And what do we have to do to get political traction for it? So we're going to break that down now. And with that, I will kick it to fellow tech wizard, Liz Brunello, to get us started here. And we are tech wizards.
We are. It's very fitting that I have the problem stream, since I created a problem immediately for us to solve. But yeah, the first stream is the problem stream. And so for, in order for our ideas to get anywhere, they need to be solutions to problems that enough people and the right people, right, like really want to fix. And it seems like a really simple thing, but overcoming political and collective inertia can actually, we all know, everyone who's here, it can be really difficult. And sometimes in the process, you realize that this problem, that you're proposing policy solutions to, isn't actually understood or felt by enough people as a problem that's urgently in need of a fix. And I was saying before, there's a book called Make It Stick, and I was thinking about it from, if you attended the social media and kind of, communication session earlier today, I learned a lot, and I was thinking about, the concept of sticky ideas, and then, how we communicate about that. And a book that I read way back in college was Make It Stick. And I learned about the history of the seatbelt, which was way more interesting than I ever thought. I was born in 91. I could not remember a time when seatbelts weren't in cars and also enforced by law. Yes, this is such a good book. And so I think I need to reread it, actually, because it's really good. But right, and everyone who remembers the decades, previously, where seatbelt law wasn't really enforced, and it was actually a really controversial topic. Forgive me, because my Cliff Note version is that, there was already a lot of data and research coming out showing that, cars are dangerous, seatbelts can really help. There were some lap style belts, not the three-pointed, the seatbelts we have today before, but in the 40s and 50s, all this research was coming out. But it wasn't until 1968, I think, that they really passed a law that was like, all cars in the US need to have these seatbelts. But even after that, it was like such a controversial thing because it was really ideological, which is something that, when we think about the mask debate now, it kind of rang a few bells for me that what a simple fix, what a simple, problem with a simple solution, but, it actually was not that simple in reality to really enact laws to keep people safe. So again, kind of this idea that we can't assume everybody is going to get on board with our proposed solution to the problem, no matter how well researched and urgent the problem, no matter how urgent we know it is. So it's a little more complicated than that. Go next slide. So the policy stream. So right, we need a really great idea. So everybody here, community members, research analysts, aka wonks, activists, organizers, we need to, develop ideas we really want to see enacted as public policy, and they need to be rooted, right, both in the research and the data, but then also the lived experiences of people who are directly impacted. And so we kind of had this, note. We were thinking about how, there's catchy slogans like food for all. And there's, that kind of translate this made to stick. Thank you, Rick. That, transmit an idea of our values and what our goals and mission might be, but that's not necessarily a policy. In AFSC, we have multiple campaigns worldwide and domestic to the US, like Free Them All, talking about de-incarceration, defund hate. We all know Black Lives Matter. Healthcare for All is one led by a lot of people, great people we know in West Virginia, are leading on Healthcare for All too. And they're really great, sticky messages, but they're also not, right, a policy idea. Many policy ideas can be, right, like umbrellaed beneath them, but we just wanted to kind of point that out, that they're a little bit different. And you do need that sticky kind of messaging, right, to make your policy idea take form too. So we have a great idea. what comes next? And we wanted to chat, just pause real quick, and in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and share a great idea you have or have had that you're really trying to get people to care about. So you can check the chat, just pause for a second. I have debate about the book name. I don't know. So any great ideas you have that you care a lot about and you're trying to get other people to care about, or that you have successfully gotten people to care about? Yeah. That's what I'm thinking of too, Rick.
Hey, this is Sayla in Braxton County. One idea that I am passionate about is the youth resiliency training, which in Ohio County, there's a partnership among organizations that called Operation Yurt, where they do trauma-aware intervention with at-risk kids, and it involves farming and storytelling, and that's something I'd like to see spread across West Virginia.
Wow, thanks for sharing that. That sounds amazing. I think a lot of areas of childhood trauma, like we've seen that concept grow and more people get educated about it, but right, it's still in that stage of, I think a lot of people maybe still need education around why is this so important, trauma prevention and responses. Oh, we got some good chat. Childhood obesity prevention by linking ECE providers with local farm coalitions. Jesse and Miranda, do you want to share a little bit about what ECE is, or your whole?
Sure. I'm actually just Jessie right now. Miranda had to head to our cooking class, but ECE is early childhood education. And by ECE providers, I'm specifically talking about like child care centers and directors. So what we've been doing is we've been hosting farmers markets by pairing the ECE provider with the local farm coalition like Turnrow, and having farmers markets at child care centers for parents to pick up produce. It's gone really well so far. We've gotten really good feedback, but our long-term goal is to make it sustainable. So essentially we're going to remove ourselves as that lay person going between and have the ECE centers start working with the farm coalition directly.
Awesome, thanks for sharing that.
I see Jim McKay has a very ambitious idea about just transforming the whole way the child welfare system works. You got that under control, Jim, right?
Yeah.
You bet, we got it.
Okay.
It's a great idea. It's a great solution. And Joanna, passing a COVID relief bill that includes global health and development aid. I think let's come back to these later too for Q&A, because I have a lot of questions and want to hear from you all. Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So it is really common to kind of get stuck at this phase where we know we have a good idea. We have research data. Hopefully we've also been building a coalition that includes a lot of impacted people who are leading, and are, empowered to share their stories. So you have both sides of research and data grounded in communities that are most impacted. And we know we really want to fix this problem. So what happens next? Go to the next one. So first, you really want to make sure, kind of doubling back, make sure that solution is really firmly linked to the problem for stakeholders and gatekeepers to take action. And this is from John Kingdon, the man himself. Conditions become defined as problems when we come to believe that we should do something about them. So that really gets into, again, if not enough people understand and feel that sense of urgency around, why this problem really needs to be solved, and why this solution makes sense, things can get stalled out. And next. So we got the two streams down, the problem and the policy stream. We've come up with the great idea. We've linked it through research, data collection, community organizing to the problem people want to fix. Just a note before I pass it to Lida, we know this phase is ongoing, and it's kind of like always happening, right? It can take years for it to work sometimes, and you keep building on successes, and sometimes you get knocked down a little bit. But I think this has been a strong running theme, and it makes sense that through the whole Food for All Summit, that it always goes back to relationships. So if we build relationships with our coalition, with our legislative champions, raise awareness and educate people about the problem, and we can really, sell our policy as a solution and do that in a really kind of integrated way. So pass to Lida for the next stream.
So yeah, so they left me to do the dirty work of the talking about the political stream.
Do you want to remind them that we're tech wizards, though?
What? You can hear me, right?
Yeah. Do you want to remind them that we're tech wizards, though?
Yes, yes. And as we said, being the tech wizards we are, and also, again, my disclaimer that my 2-year-old's waking up, but my 8-year-old is taking care of her. We'll see how this goes. So, we talked about how, okay, so we've linked that, this good idea with this problem that people want to solve, but guess what? It's not enough, because who do we ultimately have to convince to act on the policy and act on the problem, are those in the political stream, sort of the gatekeepers, whether that's legislators, whether that's superintendents of schools, what have you. And so that is where things that you might either have to wait for things, that it's sort of like, when is the timing just right? And that all this preparation that we do through the research and finding the right solution through the organizing and the media work to really get the, move people towards seeing something as a problem, that then, you sort of wait for that moment when, all right, the political stars have aligned, and now is the time to make this policy happen. So lots of things, of course, influence the political stream. And I really might have to shift it over to you, Rick, in just a second. Hey, Rick, could you take over? I'm sorry, I have a child that is needing me.
How about I hop in right here?
Yeah.
As a tech wizard. So the political stream, a lot of things can affect it, one of which is probably on everybody's mind lately, which is to say elections. In general, the public mood can have an effect. Big events, like think about COVID-19, has really changed policy, made certain things possible that were impossible, and vice versa. Some other things, changes in administration. In West Virginia, for example, when Senator Byrd died, it caused a whole political earthquake that everybody wanted to move up from the basement of the courthouse clear to Congress. And that completely changed the political stream. Someone can change the slides, because I'm a tech wizard, and it would be a vulgar display of power for me to change the slide myself.
Well, Lida has control. Oh,
okay.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, so just one way to think about it is the teacher strike in West Virginia. For years in the legislature, no one cared about the raises for school support personnel or teachers, and a mass movement was able to get things on the political stream. The pandemic, some of us probably remember the water crisis in West Virginia that poisoned the water of 300,000 West Virginians. And the fact that this happened when the legislature was in session and all the policymakers couldn't get away from it either, and the only thing you could use water for was flushing the toilet, that made them think that something needed to be done about water safety, and actually passed some pretty good legislation, which they changed the next year when the political stream changed after an election. A lot of us recently, if you follow the news, when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, it changed the balance of the Supreme Court, which changed the effect of what might happen to the Affordable Care Act, which we'll talk about. So all kinds of things, from social movements, elections, big events, and we'll get a little bit more specific about that. But these are all things that affect the political stream. So some things we have control over and some we don't. And I think a lot of the art of the possible is to adapt our actions to these conditions so that we get the maximum traction. And again, at the West Virginia legislature, for example, whether something moves or not might get down to personalities, to who's chair. If someone retires, if someone loses an election, if somebody gets mad at somebody, that could affect whether or not a policy gets infected at all. So we're talking about big events or even little tiny, very petty events or actions could affect what's possible and what's not. So if you can kick it on down.
But we also, Rick, have a chat if we want to pause just real quick to ask people if there's any other strategies they've used to influence this political stream. I see some 55 strong in the chat. So you all have seen it. Are there ways, other strategies you've used to kind of move people in this political stream? You can feel free to chat it or unmute.
Jim, that's something we've worked on for years, every year at the Capitol. Do you want to talk about ways that the Legislative Action Team for Children and Families has tried to influence the political stream once we have policy ideas and once we get people to care about our issues? And again, going back to what you said, Liz, about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, finally, that is in the problem stream. It's not a condition that people accept anymore. I think we can link a lot of policies to that. I think the opioid epidemic really got people's attention as a problem, and we were able to get probably a lot of legislation passed on criminal legal reform, partly because it affected so many people. But Jim, you want to yammer on any before we move on?
Oh, well, I'll jump in a little bit. I think that the key is the value of a coalition. I think whether in the connecting one coalition to another coalition in this space is that you never know where that relationship is, that bit of information. So kind of the relationship mapping, and so-and-so's got a better connection. Maybe it's Marissa Sanders is doing foster adoptive kinship parent network, and she's got some allies in the GOP caucus that someone else doesn't, but they're able to make a connection that talks about reproductive justice around menstrual products or something like that gets on an agenda just because, like, oh, you know what, this is actually another issue. And so I think just being able to connect the dots is really key. Connecting the dots between these different problems and the solutions. Well, you know what, so-and-so really cares about this. So, one that comes to mind is the Asthma Coalition was working on some things, and they had some data points, but they had their normal allies that were kind of the public health people, and they were trying to connect with some education folks. And the data point, the kind of condition that they were working on that connected the dots was that kids miss more school due to asthma than anything else. So they kind of were able to, with the relationship, one person, did you know this? And so then, I don't know if that fits exactly into this, but it kind of helps get something like that on a committee agenda, mobilizing somebody that has a relationship because it's been validated by somebody else. And certainly then, the lesson of 55 strong, the lesson of, our future West Virginia and some of the advocacy organization work there, hearing from people at home and the mobilization really makes a difference. And I know the food folks have done that. And the food ER is really, that group is really, I think, mobilizing in some powerful ways that will yield some fruit, if you will, as we move forward. I don't know if that makes some sense. I'm not as good a technical person, so it took me a while to mute, but I appreciate being on these technical wizards that you are.
Jim, you're a powerful and attractive man, but not a tech wizard. I want to refer to the chat a little bit here. Some people mentioned op-eds, letters to the editor. Media work is really a huge part of this. I mean, to influence politicians, to get people to think about an issue as a problem to be fixed, not a condition to be endured. And there's an interesting comment about social media and how it's changed things. And I think that's really true. And it's not always for the best, because one problem with social media now, aside from everybody flaming out on everybody else, is that people get really segmented, like this little echo chamber where they might not hear other things. And it was different when people relied more on when people actually read newspapers and things. But anyway, we can go to the next slide, and I'll be trying to follow the chat as we go. But anyway, when those streams come together, things can happen, and when they don't, it won't. And following up on Jim, another thing that's really important, I think at the legislature especially, is figuring out who can get to whom. Like, who does this person listen to? Which is the best group or message? So that's always like a really important part of thinking through this. So we can go on to the next slide. All righty, so let's do some examples here that might make it kind of clear. People have been talking about some kind of universal health care in the United States since 1912, when Theodore Roosevelt ran for president. He lost, so the political stream didn't work. Franklin Roosevelt tried to get it done. Harry Truman tried to get it done. They were blocked in the political stream by powerful lobbies, including racist Southern politicians who were afraid universal health care would involve desegregation. And a lot of times healthcare wasn't as expensive as it used to be. And a lot of people had health insurance through their jobs. So people didn't really see it as that much of a problem until more and more people lost health coverage, until we reached a point, 10 or 11 years ago when 50 million Americans were uninsured. That really put it on the problem stream. And then the results of the 2008 election, including a supermajority in the US Senate, made it possible to really push through some major legislation. And it's interesting, there were two bills that were being considered then, and when a senator died, that closed the political stream for one bill, so we had to stick with the bill we got, which got enacted into law. And when the political stream changed with election results, a lot of people wanted to undo the Affordable Care Act. We're waiting to see what happens at the Supreme Court. Another example is the Iraq War. Back in the 90s, a group of people wrote to President Clinton and said, hey, let's invade Iraq. It'll bring peace and stability to the Middle East. And we all know that worked out really well, right? But after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, people were scared. People were really afraid it could happen again. And those people followed the model. They linked their policy, invade Iraq, to a problem people were worried about, terrorism, and politicians were jumping all over it. That's an example of how a big event can, boom, push something through. Another one, I'm a big labor person. Liz Light and I are all proud union members. But for years, West Virginia was a stronghold of the labor movement. It was unthinkable that the state would pass right to work anti-union legislation. But when the political stream changed in 2014, but within a couple of years, that passed. So it's just all these different ways could affect what happens to the political stream, for things you like and for things you might not like that much. So we can move on to the next one. Chat. Oh, you got it, Liz?
Oh no, I was just gonna add, if Lida wanted to talk about CJ wins, but if timing's not right, if the window is not open for Lida to speak, that's okay.
The baby's still screaming. I guess we have a screaming baby who is probably not a tech wizard, unlike the rest of us. But the criminal justice, there have been a lot of victories in criminal justice reform over the last years, like ending the lifetime SNAP ban, a lot of expungement bills, photo ID bills, driver's license restoration. And I think one reason that came together was, again, the opioid epidemic affected so many people that they really saw it as a problem. People became aware that mass incarceration is a bad policy and costs a lot of money. So different factors came together, and we had some legislative champions like Delegate John Schott from Mercer County, Republican from Mercer County, who was a champion and directly impacted people, got involved in the efforts to change things. And wind is really open for a lot of major victories there. So anyway, you want this one? You gonna take this one?
No, you can take it, Rick.
Okay. Anyway, so what's the point of that we're yammering on about? One is this simple model can kind of point the way to think through where we are. Like, is the policy realistic and doable? And again, food for all is a good goal, but it's not a policy. You need to really get specific about it. Two, do people really care about it yet? Do enough people care about it? And again, sometimes people think of things as conditions that just have to be endured and not problems to be fixed. Think how long it took for the anti-slavery movement to gain traction in this country. Think how long it took to get things like unemployment insurance. Many policies have taken years and years and years. Jim just pointed out the racial dynamic here, that when the opioid epidemic began to affect more white people, that changed the political stream. And yes, race, as we've seen lately, race and racism has played a part of it. And then once we've worked on the policy and the problem, what has to happen politically to bring it about? And I'm going to take a quick look at the chat to see what I've been missing. Okay. All right, I think we can go on now.
Yeah.
You got a real good war story here.
Well, right. We get stuck. We do. I want to go back to Josh's chat in a second too. Yeah, that like sometimes things are unachievable, but introducing policies to try to make some headway on shifting discourse, shifting the narrative, educating people, thinking right of, positions we might be in. How can unachievable policy serve to shift political streams? I think that's a really good point as like a strategy to bring in. So in these moments when we get stuck, we have a lot of options. So you can go to the next slide. Right, it's good news. We always have choices. We don't want to run our heads against the wall. It's a surefire path to burnout, and to not being able to, when you are burnt out because you've been, kind of rolling this boulder uphill, you can kind of get blinders, right? And not see what other options are available to you. That it really helps when you're working in coalition, right? Because when you have a team, you can kind of, right, have other people point these out, like, hey, maybe we need to switch directions. So it might just not be meant to be for this specific policy you're trying to forward right now. So we can refine the policy. We can go back to the table, right? And form a community and legislative coalition to get broad input, go back and see who else needed to be at the table, and kind of evaluate how things went and what needs to change. Focus on working to change the political stream overall. So beyond public education, there's a lot of other things that you all have mentioned in the chat and we've talked about to shift public opinion. Looking at what events we might take advantage of too, even really, really bad events, right? And we'll get into that with some food specific case studies because, right, things happen and they can kind of shed a lot of light on the problem where there wasn't any before. So you want to look at what you can take advantage of and build on. And yeah, commit to spending more time raising awareness about the problem and educating people. That's always a good bet, right? I mean, ideally, right, we're doing that all throughout. We're engaging people, using social media, using op-eds, using things to like keep building our coalition bigger and bigger and keep educating people. But when something's not possible, and Rick can explain the Kairos and Chronos better, but there's a time to fight, there's a time for action, and we have to see when our window's open, we all got to stream through, right? It's, take advantage of it, but there's also a time where we see it, we might take a step back, take a deep breath, and, focus on building. And the other thing to mention too is, don't be afraid to build something new. We were talking about Gandhi's constructive program theory, and all nonviolent struggles need constructive programs to be proactive, maintain continuity of effort when direct resistance isn't possible. And to convince the public and opposition that, if this isn't just disruptive, we're not just saying we hate these things, we're proposing new things and building new things. So constructive programs can build alternative institutions, and that, doesn't lead also, because sometimes, right, we tear something down that wasn't working and it can create this power vacuum for more oppression to take its place and more, bad systems to take its place. So thinking about what are we building at the same time is really important. Rick, did you want to add anything to that?
I want to pick up on Josh's comment. I don't know if you're following the chat, everybody. What about introducing policies to shift discourse, even if they're unachievable, which he's thinking about super minority conditions. There is it can take a really long time to build a base to affect major change. And that includes all the things we talked about, education, propaganda, if you will, coalition building. So sometimes it is good to throw big ideas out there to try to make people think of things that are possible. I would just say, don't forget the stuff you can actually get done in real time. That's one thing that drives me crazy is people, this is talking to our coworkers at AFSC, they sometimes want immediate utopia now. And I'm like, yeah, whatever, we're trying to get stuff done, buzz off, so it's kind of a mixture. We want to be visionary, but also really practical at the same time. I think you can do both.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
we're
Go
gonna
to
have
the
some
next slide.
food fights now, I think, right? Oh, go ahead, Liz.
Not quite. Yeah, just I love, we can't skip over too quick because this tech wizard created these beautiful graphics with Canva, which someone named earlier in an earlier session. But yeah, sometimes it's not exciting and sexy to think about, but sometimes we have to wait, right, for that window to open. We're not just resting and doing nothing in between, obviously, but if we're talking about a specific, policy that is this solution to a problem we're trying to fix, right, for that specific thing, sometimes you need to wait. And things build on each other, like with the civil rights movement. We see that wasn't just a few years of action. That things build and build and build over time. And sometimes we don't even realize what groundwork we're laying for people to come and build on it. So we can't obsess, we can't, it's okay to, I cried in the Capitol halls. I'm not ashamed to admit last year when we had a bit of a disappointment. So I'm not saying don't be disappointed, but, don't lose heart. Act when you can, find other useful things to do. Don't be a one-hit wonder, right? You don't want to be, if your passion for one issue is where you want to be. We know amazing advocates who work on a lot of different types of legislation, but work mainly in one area. And that's amazing. You're the expert, you can, learn so much about a topic that you become really skilled at advocating for it. But right, look, keep your eyes open for other things to work on and other avenues to take. Go to the next slide. Lida's killing Bill slide. We
Yeah,
can take
Liz,
this
by
one.
the way, is the artist behind all this thing. In addition to being a tech wizard, Liz is an artist, so we have to hold that up too. But anyway, I think Lida's still tied up with the screaming child. So hearing nothing from her, this model can also help when you're trying to kill bad policy. For example, you can point out the flaws in the policy, that it wouldn't work. You can point out that it would make the problem worse, or that the real problem is this. And there's a whole messy work of thinking about how we can influence the political stream to block it, to keep those three from coming together. And going back again, I think, again, going back to that thing about advocating for policies that aren't possible now, one thing I think is really a good strategy is try to position ourselves today so that we can do more in the future when conditions are right. So it's always that sort of base building kind of thing.
Mhm.
So we can move on to the next one. Okay, food fight war stories. And we each have some examples of which. I'm going to go back a little bit to the Feed to Achieve bill, which was passed in 2013. Several things happened to make it possible. There was a select committee on child poverty that met in the legislature pretty much every week and during interims. The Catholic Diocese published a report on child poverty. There was a new coalition going, Our Children, Our Future, which was aimed at addressing child poverty. So all these things kind of came together to push through the Feed to Achieve Act. And that made it possible to do effective advocacy at the county level to get more and more counties to implement community eligibility, which means like free breakfast and lunch for all students. And that led to a bunch of policy victories at the county level. So that's one example of how things came together and it positioned food advocates for activities and victories that continue. We got another county this year to actually expand free meals and pandemic EBT cards. So that's a good example. And Lida, can you talk now, or should we talk about the SNAP stuff? Liz, you want this, or?
You can take it, Rick.
Okay, so we've worked a lot on SNAP issues, and an example here of how the streams came together. An out-of-state funded group, which was popular with legislators, kept attacking SNAP and wanting to impose work reporting requirements on people, which we've known would cut off thousands of people, especially adults without dependents. And that changed the political stream, and these advocates and these lobbyists created a window to push through some of these changes. A lot of us mobilized to make them a little less bad. On the positive side, for years, West Virginia didn't allow people with drug felonies to collect SNAP benefits. And again, probably due to awareness caused by the opioid epidemic, due to impacted people getting involved and testifying at the legislature, due to good leadership, a window opened to end that in 2019. And with SNAP now at the federal level, you can see all kind of political football being played. Like the Trump administration has issued several policies that will restrict access to SNAP. If that changes, if the political stream changes, with the next administration, some of those are likely to be undone. The Farm Bill is another example. I mean, these things get kicked around all the time, but this sort of, but Liz, you have the story of one that got away.
Well, yeah, it's a recent one. So Jenny Anderson, whose name has come up frequently on these, and she's hosting a session tomorrow, the one happening tomorrow. I encourage you all to be on that too. But we worked in coalition on a summer feeding for all bill, 2 sessions in a row. And right, I mean, we just saw each time, that the streams were not aligning for us for several different reasons. In 2020, we knew that this was kind of our last chance to push these bills through. We'll, of course, create new legislation, new and improved that, we've been workshopping with our Food for All Coalition members in between. But we knew this was kind of our last, try to like push this bill through that had, died in committee multiple times. And it did die in committee again this past year in the House Finance Committee. It was we had a heck of a time even getting it that far. And so part of it was definitely that this problem we were trying to fix, which was to, try to start assessing how we're going to fill these gaps for out of school feeding. We had data, we had research to show that during the longest out of school time, of course, during the summer, that only about 10% of food insecure households by best estimates were getting reached by the hundreds of summer feeding programs, over 500. It's a lot of programs in our state, and they still, we know weren't reaching as many kids as we want them to. So yes, Jim, exactly. So we, we were like, great, this is a problem, right? We all know it's a problem. All of us here care very deeply about, food insecurity and hunger. And it often is, this kind of, we think it should be this bipartisan issue. So we were hopeful. And there wasn't enough urgency. There wasn't enough education around out of school feeding. There was a lot of confusion about what this bill would actually do. We commonly run into the issue, right, of having to fight the idea that our bills need a fiscal note. So we had to deal with that too. And so I think we saw that one, right, there was an issue in the problem stream. Not enough people understood why, this was an issue, a problem in need of a solution urgently. There was an issue in the policy stream. Our bill was we made it very palatable to a lot of people, but it also it took away some teeth maybe from what we originally wanted. It was a little bit less, than what we wanted, which can appeal, right? It can be a benefit to do that because it appealed to a lot more people theoretically, but it also makes it a little bit less exciting to people. And then there's also this issue in the political stream. We couldn't, we tried a lot of different tactics. The picture before, kids at the legislature, our young people were really active in this, showing up and talking to their legislators, using social media.
Paper plates.
And, we just, paper plates, yeah, a lot of paper plates with messages that children had written. What does it feel like to be hungry? Very heartbreaking paper plates. And so we knew even on that last day of session, which is when that picture was from, of the kids up there with the Food for All Coalition banner, that, right, our bill had died already. But on the last day, our students wanted to show up and still like be there and say like, well, we're still here and we will come back. And lo and behold, just a few days later, like, right, school got canceled. The pandemic began in March. And on March 13th, Jenny created a Facebook group to be a place where people could share information because of this work we've been doing, we knew that it was going to be possibly kind of a nightmare and really confusing for people to figure out, okay, school's been canceled. We don't know for how long yet. We didn't know, right, that it was going to be for the whole year. And what's going to happen? How are meals going to be distributed? How are we going to do this? And so we're right. We've been in this stage of trying to build a coalition and keep building it through that Facebook group, through doing, aid work, hunger, mutual aid work in between, and just trying to, like Rick said, keep building and keep educating and trying to keep this issue in the spotlight and try to, take advantage of what the pandemic has shown that we already knew, and keep trying to do that. So yeah, hopefully we'll be at this stage on this slide of celebrating, in the future, which is where we all want to be. So with 10 minutes, I guess it's Q&A time, or Rick and Lyda, add anything you want. But I think we'd love to hear from you all about, other food justice battles you've had, or that, you anticipate, and, how to apply this 3 streams approach. So we had a lot of good.
The earliest, the last presentation where Amanda was talking about the PEBT cards, West Virginia applied for them, was turned down. Boom, the pandemic happened and it opened the window to get those cards out to people. That's another example of how events can change things. And hopefully when we go back to the legislature next year, Liz will be able to say, maybe our theory was correct, that kids need fed out of school. So anyway,
Right.
Lyda, you've been the farmer this time. You got anything to say?
Not at the moment. Sorry to be a total distraction. So,
No.
And thanks for carrying my water today.
No, thanks for Lyda.
Yeah, one thing for those of you all who
so
are
we had
on,
some good.
Sorry, I was just going to say one of the things I was struck by in the session that Seth did this morning with Delegate Lovejoy and Dean and it seems like a long time ago now. But Delegate Lovejoy said, like, one of the things that really helps him as a legislator is when somebody comes to him with like a really, that it's, of course, he wants to see like the passion and sort of like really like understand sort of like the personal experience that somebody is coming from, but it needs to be something that he can act on, so it sort of spoke to me of like the need for it to be something specific, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anybody who wants to get into the chat or unmute and share, a food justice fight you have, and yeah, just we're trying to apply this 3 streams approach, or if you just want to share with us kind of where you think your issue is in the streams, whatever you
we can workshop something. If anybody wants to workshop one of the policies that they either want to work on or have been working on.
Yeah.
I don't know if Joshua was still on here. You mentioned this right to food thing, and it would be interesting to see how that could be made into an actionable.
Yeah, hi everyone. My battery just went to 4%, so we'll see if it holds. But
obviously not a tech wizard.
Oh no.
Yeah, I was thinking about, what would it mean to introduce a constitutional amendment to the right to food? Just a tiny paragraph, take the language modeled in Maine, but again, not because it's necessarily achievable, but to open discourse. And then if by some miracle it were to pass, it would have to go to a vote to the people. And that would give us another year to educate and talk through food issues and the role of the state in that. So it's something I've been floating in my head since this summer, and I've been reaching out to other folks, that have been thinking about this across the country, lawyers, and because interestingly, the human right to food is a part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And about 192 countries have signed on to it, but the United States has not, for various reasons. And so a lot of advocates are trying to go now through states to see if that's a way to kind of influence the federal government to sign this document. But yeah, I mean, strategy wise, I'm not the wizard of the streams that AFSC and many of the panelists today have much more experience than me. So I'd love to workshop that and talk through it.
I mean, what I'm thinking about is it's kind of like healthcare for all, which is a goal, you know, but there are a lot of ways you could get there. A lot of specific policies are in the weeds. Like England has a government run system. Canada has single payer. A lot of places in Europe have a hybrid system. So, you know, we're not at the policy part needs to be, I think, that an issue right now too. Like, what would that actually look like? How could it be implemented? And that's something that occurred to, well, we were texting about that earlier today because I'm a text wizard and I have a phone that I can text on.
Yeah, and I guess the thing for me about that is that, you know, it's not like you can sue the state if you're hungry because the state guarantees the right to food, but you could sue the state for passing HB 4001, which restricts access when they really don't need to be doing that. So anyway, it is, and these large aspirational things too, I think are helpful for advocacy efforts, just to rally people from a whole bunch of different areas together. So I'm just thinking of the tension between large visionary kind of things and then the smaller nuts and bolts.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, you know, the small, like the, maybe what you might call smaller wins aren't, they aren't necessarily as like sexy or as sticky, and people aren't like, oh my gosh, yeah, that sounds so awesome. But if people kind of get clued into it and then it is a win, that's really galvanizing, because then people can feel like, oh, right, I'm a part of a winning team here. We're getting somewhere. And then, like Liz was saying, it sort of can build on it. And that even if it isn't what we want now, it's something that we can kind of build on, because nothing, you know, kind of breeds victory more than, you know, victory. But still, there's no guarantees.
Well, I think Delegate Walker said maybe yesterday, I don't know what day it was anymore, but I think she said she's ready to introduce that, Josh.
Yeah, and that was you know, it was a surprise to me that she dropped that, because it wasn't my strategy. But like I texted Rick, it's like, what do I really control anyway? You know, I've just been kind of like floating the idea and seeing where people are at, and she's like, boom, I'm gonna introduce this. Like, I don't know if that was, you know, where we were going to start, but I think it's interesting to watch these streams collide and create whitewater, and then like, well, what do you do with that? And yeah, but it can be fun work too.
I mean, this could be something we could experiment with as we go out. I mean, that's the kind of thing now. We're probably not going to be able to ram through a huge aggressive agenda right away. So this could be a time for base building and trying to think of exciting ways to engage people and get people fired up.
Yeah.
And there's nothing, you know, that is, and I'm sure I know this has come up throughout today too, just like how crucial it is to have somebody on the inside really, you know, who is either a lawmaker who really cares about it, you know, like that can make such a huge difference, because, you know, they're really, they want it as bad as you do. Counts for a lot.
A constitutional convention. Yeah, let's just go.
Yeah, let's just
open the floodgates. There's a lot of excitement in the chat for building on this universal, you know, this right to food.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about it, like I said, a lot, and been on other calls with lawyers and human rights people. And so maybe I can put together a little white paper for the coalition to think through. And
I think this proves
yeah.
Heck
So
yeah.
So some of the other, sort of proverbs we have at AFSC is like, sometimes you want to be like I have a cat who goes inside and outside. So sometimes you want to be an inside cat, you need an inside cat. And then there's also a role for outside cats. And it's kind of good to be able to go back and forth too. And that's the value of a coalition, is that you might have some really good inside cats and a bunch of other cats are running around doing crazy stuff outside.
Yeah, but we work best when we have both in our coalition. Yeah.
Some have 2 eyes and some have 1 eye.
Yeah, I can't find my one-eyed cat right now, or I would wave her around.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we should have lingered on that final screen to show our beautiful animals,
Did you show her the animals?
If I can bring it up again, I'll try. I'll try. This is, there it is. Oh my gosh.
there we go. We have a goat, we have cats, we have a very serious dog. We have it all here. I think
guess
we're at time. Yeah.
We'll see everybody again at 10 o'clock tomorrow with
Yes,
Jenny Anderson and others.
you'll have to see me again with Jenny. I'm really excited to see you all tomorrow. And there's so much good.
Good. Yeah.
So yeah, sounds like a lot of conversations that need to continue after this. So that's great.